Guys, I'm delighted to welcome welcome back to the podcast, Congressman Ken Buck. He represents the 4th Congressional District in Colorado. He's also a member of the House Judiciary Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he has a new book out. It's called Crushed: Big Tech's War on Free Speech, a topic of great interest to all of us. Ken Buck, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. Let's talk about this problem, which all of us have been kind of dimly aware of, but we're now seeing in various ways, notably with the Twitter files, the way in which the censorship operates. And it appears to be a almost terrifying sort of octopus that involves the government and a whole assortment of government entities. It involves the nonprofit sector and all these so-called kind of intermediaries. It, of course, involves the digital platforms themselves. Talk a little bit about how big this problem is now, and then I want to start talking about how we can start to deal with it, because it almost appears like it's created a new regime unto itself.
It's so interesting, Dinesh, because I think as Republicans, as conservatives, we want more speech in the marketplace of ideas. We want people to be able to express themselves and then to compete with each other. We do it within the Republican Party, which some people think is one of our weaknesses, but certainly with the general public, we want folks to be able to express themselves. The left has a completely different view of this. They want to make sure they suppress conservative speech and then amplify speech from the left. And so at almost every opportunity they get, we see them using favorable platforms to do this. So when it comes to the big tech platforms, they're monopolies. And personally, I don't have anything wrong with people being big and successful. And sometimes monopolies operate just fine. But when you have a monopoly over the flow of information, over the dissemination of information, and you are woke and you are left wing and you live in California, in Silicon Valley, it ends up that those platforms are using their speech in a way that discriminates. And not just discriminates, but I really believe they are winning elections based on what they've done. Google changed its algorithm in June of 2020 so that everybody who searched for Donald Trump got negative articles and everybody who searched for Joe Biden got positive articles. And obviously you can't measure just how many people changed their vote or went from undecided to one candidate or the other. But that kind of almost subliminal messaging has an effect. And I think it has a very large effect. And we're not going to win elections in this country. We conservatives are not going to win elections in this country. We're certainly not going to win presidential elections if the left is able to use these platforms in the way that they're using them.
Now, it seems that the first step is just to expose this, right? To bring it to public light. I think fortunately with Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, he did something I didn't anticipate that he would do, which is he did a sort of a crime scene investigation of his own social media site. And that's how we get all this new information. Is there a way for the House to haul Google and YouTube and Meta? And I don't just mean Mark Zuckerberg to say a few generalities about the Hunter Biden story. I'm talking about getting into the algorithms and the way in which these companies operate so that we can get comparable exposés of information on those platforms to what we have on Twitter. Is there a way to get that kind of data from these guys?
Yeah, absolutely. There is. And we're doing it. So in the Judiciary Committee, we look at antitrust issues and we also look at some constitutional privacy issues. In the Energy and Commerce Committee, they have responsibility for Section 230, as well as some of the other privacy issues. So between the two committees, we will be looking at big tech and we will be calling in their executives, hopefully their chief executives, and getting testimony about what they knew and when they knew it.
Now, as I understand it, it's very clear that the First Amendment says that the government can't restrict speech. And so I think that the Biden people seem to be saying, all right, well, we can't do it directly, but why don't we use the Stanford Internet Observatory, and why don't we use the Aspen Institute, and why don't we use all these other go-betweens? And by the way, some of those go-betweens are nonprofits that themselves get money. So you now have this kind of private-public partnership, if you will, to promote censorship. Let's take a pause because we're coming up against a break. But when we come back, I want to ask you, this would seem to be a flagrant constitutional violation. How do we get it before the courts, and specifically the Supreme Court, so that the Supreme Court, which is the custodian of our First Amendment rights, can say, this is a serious violation, this needs to stop. So we'll be right back with Congressman Ken Buck.